What kind of sparks will fly when ancient sorcery meets alien technology? Today, let's enjoy a movie with this kind of brainstorming. The story begins with an alien spaceship slowly appearing over Seoul's skyline, first showcasing advanced extraterrestrial technology, followed by the release of a seemingly mystical alien stone. After gliding through the air for several seconds, the stone eventually crashes through a hospital window, landing in the corridor. In the next moment, the stone begins to rapidly expand. A passing female doctor sees this and is frozen in place. As the doctor stands there, unsure of what to do, the stone that was just small a moment ago, in the blink of an eye, transforms into a massive golden egg. The female doctor had never seen this kind of alien technology, so she couldn't help but walk forward. But just as she's about to reach out and touch the golden egg, it suddenly cracks open, revealing a vibrant, rainbow-hued interior. In the next second, an extremely sharp tentacle emerges. The doctor's curiosity quickly turns into terror, but by then it's clearly too late for her to escape. All the people nearby were hit in the back of the head by the tentacles coming out of the golden egg, and they instantly lost consciousness and were unable to move. Yet, it seems the assault from the tentacles is far from over. Even those who hide inside lockers are quickly and precisely found and stabbed by the tentacles. Soon, everyone in the hospital has been attacked by the tentacles. A man, just waking up, is horrified by the scene before him, but before he can even process what's happening, he too is struck by a tentacle. It feels as though something is invading his brain, as if an alien virus is completely taking over. His pupils even turn a strange shade of gold. Inevitably, the man loses consciousness. At this point, it seems the only person in the hospital not yet struck by the tentacles is a little girl. The frightened little girl tries to escape, but the tentacles clearly have no intention of letting her go. Fortunately, a male patient, who has somehow survived, suddenly appears. The girl quickly hides behind him. At first, the male patient is just as confused as everyone else, but upon seeing the people around him turned into statues, he instinctively tries to confront the tentacles. Unfortunately, he too is eventually struck by one. At that moment, a dashing man suddenly appears, and it seems like he knows the little girl. The little girl doesn't answer, but instead runs out of the hospital in a panic. At that point, the tentacles all retract back into the golden egg. As the egg reverts to its stone form, everyone in the hospital instantly regains consciousness, seemingly with no memory of what had just occurred. They continue doing whatever they were doing before they were struck. It turns out this was all part of the aliens' process of imprisoning their captives. A long time ago, the aliens began using Earth as a prison, and to them, the human body is the most perfect cell. As humans die, so do the prisoners within them, and this man, a prison guard sent to Earth by the aliens to catch prisoners who try to escape. Although the guard has a highly advanced robot named Thunder that can transform into a human form to assist him, his task remains a difficult one, for in the eyes of the aliens, time and space are not singular concepts. They have been on Earth for over 600 years. This means that the guard doesn't just oversee the prisoners of this current time. Even if a prisoner escapes in ancient times, he must traverse through time to capture them. Fortunately, with Thunder's help and the aliens' specially designed armor, the guard has always managed to capture the escapees effortlessly. But during the capture in 1380, they accidentally discovered that the human woman, serving as the cell, had just given birth to a baby. Since the prisoner had separated from the woman's body, she was certain to die, and the people of that time even wanted to kill the so-called demon offspring. Although Thunder was fond of the baby, Guard firmly reminded him that aliens were not allowed to interfere in human affairs. Thunder had no choice but to comply, and they returned to 2012. Afterward, the guard placed the escapee into a containment unit, waiting for the next group transport to prison. Just as the guard was about to tidy up and rest, he discovered that Thunder had brought the baby from 1380 back with him, nearly causing the guard to explode with anger. Thunder explained that he wanted to conduct experiments on the baby to better understand humans. Reluctantly, the guard agreed. Little did he know, the less they understood about humans, the better. Sure enough, when the year 2022 came and Ian started school, she began causing him constant trouble, even reporting to her school that there was a talking car at her house. But every time Ian recorded a video, Thunder would delete it beforehand, so no one ever believed her. Though the guard's identity remained undiscovered, his frequent appearances at the school caught the attention of a classmate's mom, which left him in an awkward position, as he had never been in a relationship with an Earthling before. What surprised Guard even more was when Ian placed her phone in the car to eavesdrop, learning that in 18 hours, a group of prisoners would be sent to Earth. and they had already identified a hospital with 107 hosts. Ian didn't understand what this meant, so that night, she snuck out to ask the talking car about it. Unfortunately, Thunder ignored her. However, just as Ian was about to retrieve her phone, she accidentally discovered the containment unit under the seat, which held the escaped prisoners. Seeing that Ian was about to open the unit, Thunder was forced to reveal himself, transforming into the guard's form and striking up an enthusiastic conversation with her. It seems Thunder was quite fond of Ian, otherwise, he wouldn't have violated the rules by bringing her back in the first place. Thunder, full of pride, revealed both his and the guard's true identities to Ian, and even told her the location of tomorrow's prisoner transport. As the system warning sounded, Thunder finally realized he had made a big mistake, so he reverted to his robotic form and told Ian to leave. However, when guard came to him, Thunder lied that it was a system malfunction, which led to the opening scene where Ian bumped into a prisoner in the hospital. Luckily, the number of hosts had been pre-calculated, so Ian narrowly escaped becoming one of the prison hosts herself. But Ian took her phone and hid at her classmate's house, showing the video she recorded to her friend. Through Thunder's calculations, the guard realized Ian was hiding at the house of the woman who had taken an interest in him. He had no choice but to send Thunder, disguised as himself, to bring Ian back home. They were forced to confess everything to her. Ian finally learned that she had traveled from over 600 years ago to the present. Although the aliens had turned Earth into a prison, the guard's duty was to protect humanity. So, Ian didn't reject her alien father, but could the three of them really live peacefully from now on? Obviously not. One of the police officers present during the prison ceremony at the hospital discovered a mole within the force during an investigation. In his anger, Moon Dusuk was controlled by the prisoner inside him. He not only killed 2 moles but also became a fugitive wanted by the police. The awakening signal of this prisoner attracted an alien spaceship. Thunder's database was even mysteriously hacked. Pulling up the police officer's file, when the guard learned of the situation, he immediately realized someone was trying to break out the prisoners. As he prepared to stop them, Ian stubbornly refused to leave the car. With time running out, the guard decided to bring Ian along to witness the events firsthand. Meanwhile, the alien spaceship had already arrived over Seoul and easily located the building where Dusuk was hiding. Dusuk, having seen the news about his wanted status, was preparing to flee, but as he entered the hallway, he encountered a strange red robot. At the same time, the guard arrived at the building, running into the police officers sent to capture the fugitive. Without wasting time, the guard disarmed them by removing their guns. Ian, who was in the car, puts all the guns into his school bag. On the other side, Dusuk had just stepped into the elevator when the red robot burst in. Panicking, he pulled out his gun and fired, but it had no effect. As Dusuk stood there, bewildered, the guard descended from the sky just in time. The 2 armored warriors began trading blows. Each punch seemed light but was powerful enough to kill an elephant. The red robot, however, appeared to be the stronger of the 2. The guard fired off small energy blasts in retaliation. Just as he gained a slight advantage, the red robot unleashed a more powerful laser beam, slicing through half the building. Dusuk, still in the elevator, barely escaped being killed by the laser. Fortunately, the guard shielded him just in time. Then, the guard summoned a laser sword and immediately pierced the red robot's body, but it didn't seem to be a fatal blow, and instead, the guard was kicked down the elevator shaft by the red robot. The red robot summoned tentacles that penetrated the guard and retrieved the divine sword from within him, the very sword capable of awakening prisoners. Though the guard managed to retaliate with his laser sword, he was ultimately blasted to the bottom of the elevator shaft by the red robot's laser wave. By this time, Dusuk had already climbed out of the elevator and hijacked a police car to make his escape. The red robot, sensing this, returned directly to the spaceship and began chasing Dusuk down the streets with the massive ship. Meanwhile, Thunder found the guard at the bottom of the elevator shaft. Fortunately, his armor had protected him, and he was unharmed. Thunder had already identified the prisoner inside Dusuk. It was none other than the leader of the rebel organization from their planet. The critical issue was that the divine sword capable of freeing the prisoners had been stolen, so they had to act quickly to stop them. At the same time, Dusuk looked in the rearview mirror of the police car and saw the alien spaceship chasing him, so he quickly sped into an underground parking garage. But to his shock, the alien spaceship flew right in after him. Panicking, he reversed the car to make his escape. Although Dusuk narrowly managed to flee the garage, it was clear there was no way he could outrun the alien ship. The pedestrians were utterly terrified by the scene unfolding before their eyes. At the critical moment, the guard finally arrived in his ship. After a few attacks, he shot down the rebel ship, but the alien ship's shield was too strong, leaving it unharmed. While human buildings suffered significant damage, the rebel ship quickly took off again and immediately fired a massive laser beam at the guard's ship. Although the guard and his team were able to dodge thanks to their incredible maneuverability, it was yet another devastating blow to the human city. Thunder quickly calculated that the red section on the rebel ship, which fired the laser, was its weak point. However, they needed to lure the rebel ship out of the city, or more humans would be caught in the crossfire. Their plan was to lure the rebels high into the sky before launching a counterattack. But before they could fully change direction, the rebel ship's laser destroyed their shields, causing them to crash into the river and temporarily lose their ability to fly. Seeing this, the rebel ship turned back to pursue Dusuk. With a single laser blast, all the surrounding cars were sent flying, and Dusuk crashed into an oncoming vehicle, sending him flying onto a nearby bus. At this point, the rebel ship finally landed on the ground, and the red robot reappeared. All it needed to do was drive the divine sword into Dusuk's body, and their leader, the controller, would successfully break free from his prison. Luckily, the guard's ship had been repaired, and he leaped back into the fight. Unfortunately, the red robot wasn't looking for a prolonged battle. Before being struck down, it successfully threw the divine sword, precisely stabbing it into Dusuk. When Guard realizes this, he tries to stop the controller from awakening, but the red robot doesn't let up. It not only uses its maximum power to attack, but it also hugs Guard and blows itself up. Thunder found Guard in time and treated him to save his life. By now, the controller inside Dusuk had fully awakened. He stepped off the bus, and upon seeing his rebel ship, opened his mouth wide and began spewing golden liquid. The golden liquid then coalesced, revealing the controller's true form. Once the alien separates from its host, it can only survive for 5 minutes in Earth's environment. Therefore, the controller couldn't let the host stray too far and was forced to control Dusuk's body as they moved toward the ship together. On the other side, Thunder restored the guard's life force to 36%, but then ran out of energy. The guard instructed Thunder to first figure out what the controller's objective was. Following the order, Thunder rushed off and just in time, managed to slip aboard the ship with the controller. At that moment, the controller had already released countless red balloons. These balloons, called Hava, were filled with gases from another planet, the very gases that aliens needed to survive, but which humans couldn't survive in for even a second. It turned out that the rebel organization's plan was to release the Hava gas and completely transform Earth into their new home. When the guard learned of this, he dragged his injured body aboard the ship and engaged the controller in close combat. Though the guard barely managed to knock the controller out of the ship, 2 of the Hava balloons had already leaked outside. Unaware, the guard quickly grabbed the divine sword he had just reclaimed, intending to recover the Hava balloons still inside the ship. He also ordered Thunder to go after the controller, as this was the most vulnerable moment for him, having just detached from his host. Little did the guard know, the controller was planning to take over Ian's body. Fortunately, Thunder arrived just in time to drive the controller away. Although the controller returned to Dusuk's body, at least Ian was safe. Thunder told Ian to hide in the car while he continued to pursue the controller, but he soon discovered that 2 Hava balloons had leaked, so capturing the controller had to wait. Recovering the Hava balloons became the top priority. The reason why the controller suddenly disappears is because he is looking for the Hava balls to detonate. As the Hava gas quickly spread, those who inhaled it collapsed and died instantly. The speed of its spread was alarming, covering an enormous area. Panicked humans, unaware of what was happening, began to flee in terror. Thunder, having just recovered one of the Hava balloons, was too busy helping humans escape to worry about what the controller was plotting. Thankfully, Ian managed to escape by car. The guards successfully recovered the Hava balloons and immediately piloted the ship back home. Unknowing humans sent medical teams into the Hava gas to rescue survivors. They had no idea that the controller wasn't the only alien inside the gas, because there were 2 human vessels acting as cells within the gas. The prisoners inside them awakened upon inhaling the Hava gas. The rescue team was wiped out almost immediately, but drones managed to capture footage of the 2 new aliens. The guard and his team, just back home, saw this on TV and immediately realized they were in grave danger. Those prisoners would undoubtedly come for the ship soon, intending to detonate the Hava balloons inside. The key problem was that the guard was down to half health. Even at full strength, he might not be able to defeat the controller, and now the controller had 2 new allies. Thunder ran the data analysis and concluded their chances of victory were only 1%. But even so, the guard refused to give up. He ordered Thunder to take Ian and escape, while he stayed behind to make a last stand. Sure enough, just after Thunder and Ian left, the 3 prisoners arrived. As soon as they boarded the ship, they discovered it had been preset to launch. Clearly, the guard intended to take them into space and go down with the ship. To prevent them from altering the program, the guard hid in the shadows, waiting to strike, but the controller found him. Just as the guard was about to be killed, Thunder suddenly returned, bringing Ian with him. The reason? The odds of victory were steadily increasing. It turns out that Ian had just learned that the guard, who had raised her for 10 years, was also a robot, and his programming dictated that he couldn't escape. Although Ian was very upset, she still calmly asked Thunder why they didn't stay behind together. Thunder's answer, of course, was that even if they stayed, the chances of success would still be very low. But Ian countered by asking Thunder if he had no emotions. Thunder, being a robot, naturally didn't understand what emotions were. Yet, as Ian's determination to save people grew stronger, Thunder's calculated probability of success increased. Understanding the strength of human emotions, Thunder decided to return. He also calculated that destroying the red dot at the center of the ship would cause the ship to malfunction entirely, trapping the Hava balloons inside. Hearing this, the guard quickly threw the divine sword, and Thunder caught it in midair. But just as Thunder was about to destroy the red dot, he was suddenly struck down by a laser. It was another prisoner coming out to stop him. Thunder was forced to dodge multiple laser blasts, and even when he transformed into a spherical form, he was still blasted away. Although it wasn't a fatal blow, the divine sword had been lost in the chaos. Now that both prisoners are out, it's hard for Thunder to destroy the ship alone. Worse yet, the controller had already activated the self-destruct sequence for the Hava balloons, and in 30 minutes, the Hava gas would sweep across the entire Earth. The controller arrogantly mocked the guard before tossing him out of the ship. Seeing this, Ian quickly dragged the barely conscious guard back into the car, asking him why he didn't just lock those guys in a time loop, then come back to stop everything easily. Hearing this, the guard had an epiphany. In that crucial moment, Ian spotted the fallen divine sword and hurried to retrieve it, but the 3 prisoners noticed her and launched a simultaneous attack on the young girl. Luckily, Thunder intervened just in time, allowing Ian to grab the sword. Thunder then pretended to be plotting something as he flew back toward the ship. The 3 prisoners, clueless about what was happening, followed closely behind. Once the plan worked, the guard immediately used the divine sword to open a time rift, and as expected, the 3 prisoners were sent into another time. They arrived in Goryeo, the year 1381, where 3 hunters saw a car fall from the sky, thinking it was a sign of bad luck from the heavens. Meanwhile, the car carrying the guard and Ian barreled through the terrain, managing to lose Thunder and the prisoners, only to nearly plunge into a lake. The guard frantically called for Thunder to bring them back to the future, but Thunder had been damaged and couldn't fly. At that very moment, the controller appeared before them once again. The guard, left with no choice, braced himself for another fight, but he was already severely weakened and stood no chance against the controller. The guard struggled to buy time, telling Thunder to take Ian and escape, but there was still no response from Thunder. In the end, the controller ruthlessly tore off one of the guard's arms, but just then, Thunder came back online and told the guard that the probability of success was increasing again, though the guard had no idea why. However, Ian, still in the car, suddenly pulled out a gun and fired at the controller. Although the controller pushed Ian into the lake with the car, the controller's body is no longer working, and the portal in the sky has been closed. The controller is not only trapped in time, but also must find a new host within 5 minutes, or else it will be completely dead. Meanwhile, Ian, who had fallen into the lake, was still trying to reach for Excalibur, but in the end, she sank due to lack of stamina. At that moment, Thunder, using the last of its energy, told Ian to find and reboot it as soon as possible, so they could return to 2022 to save the Earth. It was clear that when Thunder mentioned the increase in success rate earlier, it wasn't referring to the present moment, but rather that they needed to lie low in this ancient world for a while. In the blink of an eye, 10 years passed, and by 1391, the lost divine sword finally resurfaced. At first, the locals only recognized its great value, but they soon discovered that the sword also had healing powers, sparking a bloody and violent struggle for its possession across the martial world. Murek, a second-rate Taoist seeking the sword for its bounty, kept 2 cats that could transform into human form hidden within his fan. Murek heard from an old man named Kaidunai that the sword was now in the hands of Hyungam at the Blue Garden Inn, but just as he prepared to seize it, a man in a modern suit also approached Hyungam. When Murek arrived, he was shocked to see a strange tentacle burst through the door, and Hyungam had already been impaled by the divine sword. Fearing that the sword would fall into the hands of this strange man, Hyungam pulled it from his chest and threw it out the window, where it was caught by none other than Kye-dun-ai, the very man who had told Murek where the sword was. Naturally, the man in the suit wasn't going to let Kye-dun-ai go easily, but before he could act, Murek intervened. At first, Murek thought his martial arts skills would be enough to subdue the strange man, unaware that this opponent was a futuristic alien. It didn't take long for Murek to realize he was hopelessly outmatched, and he was soon violently pinned to the wall by the man. It wasn't until nightfall that he was freed by Left King and Right King, who had taken human form. As they gathered themselves, they suddenly noticed something strange behind the wall. Upon investigation, they discovered Thunder's original ship, though none of them knew what it was. Just then, they spotted a strange woman dressed in red standing nearby, but they didn't think much of it. After all, their only goal was to retrieve the sword and collect the bounty. Meanwhile, a man and a woman, claiming to be sorcerers, appeared at the Blue Garden Inn. They remarked that if the divine sword had stayed with them at the time, Hyungam wouldn't have ended up in such a situation. It turned out that they, along with Hyungam, were the three who had witnessed the time travel incident all those years ago. Huxeol looked at the window shattered by the tentacle and suspected that Hyungam had encountered a monster. There had also been recent rumors of a monster living in a Taoist temple called Maiban, so they decided to investigate. However, they didn't find a monster. Instead, they learned from the temple's leader that Kye-dun-ai had sold the divine sword to a local landlord. Meanwhile, Murek believed that the sword might have already been stolen by the man in the suit. He gathered information from nearby villagers and discovered the man's address, but when he searched the room, no one was there. What they did find was a secret letter from the Maiban leader addressed to the man in the suit, stating that the sword was at the Blue Garden Inn. Clearly, the man in the suit had been sent by the Maiban leader to steal the sword. Could the sword have been taken to Maiban already? Before Murek could investigate, they also heard that Kye-dun-ai had sold the sword to a local landlord. It just so happened that the landlord's daughter was getting married that day, so Murek kidnapped the groom and disguised himself to sneak into the wedding. During the wedding night, Murek only symbolically drank a cup of wine with the bride before rushing off to find the sword. But as soon as he entered one of the rooms, he began to feel weak and dizzy, realizing that he had been drugged. When Murek crawled back to the bride's room, he saw her fiddling with some objects he had never seen before. It turned out that the bride was also an imposter, and she was none other than Ian, who had traveled through time. By now, Ian had grown up. The woman in red whom Murek had seen by the river earlier was also Ian. Murek, who had been drugged, was still asking for the antidote, but Ian said that she didn't have it, and told him to rest assured that he would wake up after a short sleep. Meanwhile, the two sorcerers had arrived with the Maiban followers. After Huxeol played a tune on his flute, the landlord was about to offer up the sword willingly, but before he could, Ian suddenly emerged, shooting one of the Maiban followers dead with her handgun. The landlord's servants, seeing this, quickly handed the sword to Ian. But how could the two sorcerers let Ian leave so easily? They raised their invisibility cloak and hid themselves. Ian had never seen magic like this before. Panicking, she tried to escape but was tripped by the invisible sorcerers. She fired her gun wildly, but it was clearly of no use. One of the sorcerers took advantage of the moment, approaching Ian to try and grab the sword. After injuring the sorcerer, Ian managed to escape, only to be ambushed and knocked unconscious by the Maiban leader, losing the sword in the process. Eventually, the unconscious Murek was rescued once again by Left King and Right King, but Ian had been captured by the Maiban leader. It turned out that the Maiban leader, Zhang, was another prisoner who had traveled through time. He and the man in the suit had been searching for the controller and the divine sword. Now that they had the sword, they believed the controller must have switched to a new human host. They needed the sword to awaken him. Hyungam, who appeared at the time portal, wasn't the host. Aside from the two sorcerers, the only other witness was Hyungam's servant. The sorcerers were cut during the earlier fight for the sword, but the controller didn't awaken, which meant he must have been residing in the servant. However, the servant had been missing for years and might be dead by now. So, their next plan was to find the guard's ship and travel back to 2022, where they could once again release the Hava gas. But before that, they intended to poison the troublesome sorcerers and Ian. When a guard was sent to deliver the poisoned meal to Ian, it ended up being handed off to another new guard. Little did they know, the new guard was actually Murek in disguise. He had already snuck in with Left King and Right King. Upon seeing Ian, Murek didn't hesitate to remove his mask, but he had no intention of rescuing her. It wasn't because Ian had drugged him earlier, but because Murik couldn't figure out how to break the invisible barrier. So, he simply left to continue with his own plans. As Murik went to steal the divine sword, Hugseol and Chongwon, who were guarding the area, had just eaten the poisoned meal Zhejiang had given them. Though the two sorcerers had celestial energy protecting them and didn't die, they were paralyzed, unable to move. As they struggled to retrieve an elixir to counter the poison, they caught Murik trying to steal the divine sword. Upon hearing the food was poisoned, Murik immediately realized that the meal he had delivered to Ian must also have been poisoned, so he grabbed one of the elixirs. But before Murik could act, he was spotted by Maiban's guards. He fought them off but was quickly noticed by Zhejiang. Before Murik could escape, he was severely injured by a tentacle. Thankfully, Left King and Right King arrived just in time to rescue him. On the other side, Hugseol and Chongwon finally get the antidote and eat half of it mouth-to-mouth to get rid of the poison. On the other side, however, Ian, being fully human, was in critical condition. Murik, saved by Left King and Right King, dragged his injured body back to rescue her. Though he managed to force-feed the elixir to Ian, she still didn't respond. Murik was suddenly stabbed by Zhejiang, who then tossed him into the lake. Ian was buried alive, but just as she was buried, the elixir began to work, and Ian finally woke up, realizing her dire situation. She quickly pulled out her gun and shot the two guards burying her. Filled with fury, Ian set off to find Zhejiang and reclaim the divine sword. She managed to catch Zhejiang off guard with a surprise attack, forcing him to drop the sword. But as soon as Ian picked it up, the man in the suit appeared, and Zhejiang, though wounded, wasn't fatally injured. Even with a pistol, Ian is no match for these two perverted aliens. At that moment, Hugseol and Chongwon arrived, seeking revenge for being poisoned. However, they were quickly overpowered. The man in the suit spotted Ian hiding behind a window and lunged at her with a powerful leap. Ian dodged with a sliding move, firing 2 shots at him in the process. Unfortunately, before she could escape, the man in the suit tackled her to the ground, and the sword was snatched away. Meanwhile, Hugseol and Chongwon resumed their battle with Zhejiang. This time, they immediately used a binding charm to freeze him in place. Hugseol then pulled out a seemingly ordinary mirror. Chongwon tossed a small jar toward the mirror, and as it passed through, the jar instantly expanded, trapping Zhejiang inside. They quickly plastered multiple binding charms all over the jar. On the other side, the man in the suit suddenly rose into the air, holding the divine sword. Ian fired at him but realized there was a protective shield around him. In reality, the alien had already detached from his body, preparing to unleash his full power in the next 5 minutes. Under the alien's control, Ian was about to shoot herself. At that crucial moment, a big knife falls from the sky and ends up in Murik's hand. Murik had no idea why he wasn't dead, and this time, he even managed to summon an ultimate weapon from his treasure fan, allowing him to fight the alien on equal footing. But the alien fought dirty, firing off a laser that knocked Murik unconscious again. At this point, Ian was desperately trying to break through the alien's shields to retrieve Excalibur, but her pistol was clearly not powerful enough, and in the next second, the alien was chasing after her once more. Hugseol jumps onto the roof to help, and then reaches into the mirror. Traditional Taoist techniques, however, still lost to alien technology. But just then, Murik reappeared, wielding his large sword. Yet, the alien's laser continued to pose a difficult challenge. In frustration, Murik slashed off the alien's laser-firing hand, and in a surge of momentum, pinned the alien to the wall with his sword. On the other side, Ian, who can't help at all, is still thinking about how to break the shield. Suddenly, Hugseol shouted, "The mirror!" Realizing what she meant, Ian immediately threw the mirror into the air and fired a shot. As soon as the bullet passed through the mirror, it grew 100 times larger and easily shattered the alien's shield. However, just as Ian grabbed the divine sword, Zhejiang broke free from the jar. Everyone present was paralyzed with fear at the sight of the alien's true form. Ian, instead of fighting, took the divine sword and ran. Zhejiang's eyes were only on Excalibur, and he chased after Ian without caring about the others. Murik tried to follow to protect Ian, but when he pulled out his sword, he realized the alien had already been killed by him. It turned out that 10 years ago, it was young Murik who had saved Ian, diving into the water to retrieve her backpack and the handgun inside. As they rested, they suddenly heard strange noises, and when Murik went to investigate, he came face to face with the controller, who was searching for a host. Remembering all of this, Murik suddenly passed out. Meanwhile, after hearing the alien's words, Hugseol and Chongwon finally remembered that it wasn't just them, Hyungam, and his servant at the time portal. In fact, there was also Hyungam's young son, who had become abnormal after his return. As a fellow cultivator, Hyungam had sensed the monster inside his son, so he left the treasure fan with the boy to keep the creature in check and had his servant take the boy to hide in the mountains. On the other side, Ian, still fleeing, was quickly caught up by Jajang. Fortunately, she jumped into the river just in time to evade, and with the help of the branches for cover, she successfully escaped. Back at Maibin Temple, Hugseol and Chongwon had brought Murek back with them. They initially planned to kill him before the monster inside him could awaken, but in the end, they couldn't bring themselves to do it. When Murek woke up, the first thing he did was ask Milbon about the situation. That's when he learned that the current leader of the Maibin Temple wasn't a good person at all. 10 years ago, the Maibin followers found Jajang unconscious by the river. After bringing him back to the temple, Jajang killed the original leader and took control of Maibin. The deputy leader, who tried to resist, was blinded by Jajang. Since then, Maibin had become Jajang's stronghold. The reason they were after the divine sword was because they were trapped in time and needed to use the sword to identify their leader from 4 candidates. It turned out the only one left untested was Hyungam's servant. Milbon had overheard all of this by pretending to be deaf and blind. Hugseol and Chongwon immediately understood why they had been poisoned earlier. Fortunately, Jajang didn't yet realize that Murek was the one they were really looking for. On the other side, Ian, now in possession of the divine sword, was solely focused on finding Thunder to reboot Thunder, so she could return to the future and save Earth. But while resting in a tea house, she ran into K-Dun-I, the man who had previously stolen the sword. To her surprise, he had actually seen Thunder before. K-Dun-I turned out to be the servant of Hyungam from all those years ago. After taking Murek with him, K-Dun-I had let him grow up freely, which was why Murek never knew that K-Dun-I was his adoptive father. Ian planned to follow the rough directions given by K-Dun-I to find Thunder, but that night, Jajang tracked her down again. Although Ian managed to fend him off with her gun, she was soon cornered by Maibin's followers in a small room. Thinking she was out of options, a blindfolded man suddenly appeared. It turned out that he was Nungpa, the deputy leader who had been blinded by the aliens years ago. Upon learning that the people from Maibin were trying to steal the divine sword, Nungpa decisively stepped in and easily took down all the guards. However, Nungpa also had his eyes on the divine sword in Ian's hands. He had heard that the sword could heal any wound, and he wanted to use it to restore his sight. The key was that he had seen the sword before he claimed to have witnessed a strange man hiding it inside his thigh. Just as Nungpa was telling Ian this, a hand suddenly appeared behind him. It turned out to be Murek, who had come with an invisibility cloak. In the end, he and Ian used it to vanish and escape together. Murek had been able to find Ian because he had sent his 2 cats to follow her. When Ian learned that the boy who had saved her all those years ago was Murek, she revealed to him that she was from the future. The most important thing was that she needed to use the divine sword to return to the future and stop the aliens from releasing the Hava gas and wiping out humanity. But then, Murek suddenly asked Ian to kill him, fearing that there might be an alien inside him too. To his surprise, Ian thought that was even better, since as long as Murek wasn't cut by the divine sword, the alien inside him would remain sealed. The next day, they followed K-Dun-I's directions and returned to the house where Murek had previously encountered the man in the suit. In a dusty corner, they found a rusty Thunder. Left King and Right King also found figures who looked exactly like them inside the house. They wanted to chase after them for answers, but the lookalikes were too terrified to speak. At that moment, they stumbled upon someone trying to capture K-Dun-I. During the fight, Right King was hit by an arrow. In the end, K-Dun-I was taken away, and Right King disintegrated into fragments before Murek's eyes. Thunder, which was just found by Ian, reacts to this. It turns out that it was the alien Jajang who kidnapped K-Dun-I, planning to test if K-Dun-I was the controller after stealing the divine sword. However, Jajang also heard that a young Murek had been at the crossing point at the same time, so he figured he'd wait for Murek to show up and test him as well. After all, he had already moved the spaceship needed to return to the future into the Byron Pavilion. Sure enough, Ian quickly received this information, but before they could reach Byron Pavilion, Hugseol and Chongwon arrived first. As soon as they entered, they discovered the bodies of many Maibin members. Of course, they had no idea that it was Jajang who had killed them. When they discovered Nungpa hiding in the shadows, they initially thought he was responsible, but Nungpa claimed that the people were already dead when he arrived. They had known each other from before, and Nungpa's sword had come from the 2 wizards. At this point, Murek and Left King also arrived at the scene. Ian, on the other hand, sneaked in from the roof and even managed to locate the spaceship. But at that moment, the alien lurking in the shadows finally made its move, killing Left King as soon as it struck. Ian immediately became alert upon hearing the commotion, but instead of the alien, the two wizards appeared before her. Just as she was wondering why they were there, the alien's tentacles suddenly shot out. Hugseol desperately tried to pull her away but couldn't hold on. In the end, it was Nungpa who stepped in and severed the tentacle with his sword. However, the alien still managed to steal the divine sword. Nungpa charged in, eager to avenge his blinded eyes, but was quickly sent flying by the alien. Seeing this, Muruk, who had just lost his pet, rushed in to avenge the Catman. Unaware that this delighted the alien, the divine sword was now in its grasp, and Muruk walked right into the trap. Ready to be tested, Muruk was struck by the divine sword. Ian, seeing the scene unfold, was completely panicked. She tried to pull out the sword to save Muruk. In the end, Ian did manage to pull out the sword, but Muruk's mind had already begun to flood with memories from the past. Looking at her hand, which had been cut by the divine sword, Ian suddenly felt a strange discomfort. Memories of the past finally came rushing back. It turned out that when the controller had tried to take over Muruk's body, the guard had arrived just in time to save him. Following the noise, Ian had discovered the controller's body. Unbeknownst to her, the controller had already escaped to save itself. And in the end, it was Ian whose body had been taken over. As for the so-called monster inside Muruk, it was actually just the alien energy that Guard had transferred to him, which is why he didn't die at Zhang's hands. Later, when Muruk killed the alien, it was because of the Guard's energy within him. As for Thunder, it had tried to fly over and rescue its master, but halfway there, it had run out of energy and crashed into the home of two brothers, transforming into their likeness and entering sleep mode. The reason Thunder had also taken the form of a small cat was that there just happened to be two kittens nearby at the time. The alien inside Muruk's body did not awaken when he was stabbed by the divine sword. Instead, Ian, sensing that something was wrong, immediately tried to shoot herself. Unfortunately, she was a moment too late. After a brief struggle, Ian's body was completely taken over by the controller. The newly recharged Thunder rushed over to greet her, only to be swatted away with a single blow. Then Zhang slowly appeared. Once they reunited, they immediately used the divine sword to open a portal in time and space, preparing to return to the future and release the Hava gas again. But just as they were about to leave, Nungpa launched another attack, snatching the divine sword back. However, in the very next second, he was taken down by one of Ian's tentacles. The sword conveniently dropped right in front of Hugseol and Chongwon. They picked it up but didn't dare to attack rashly, instead being forced back by the two aliens, who eventually pushed them straight into the portal. The two aliens followed them and immediately, little did they know, Thunder had already fully recovered its energy, and the guard, whom they thought had died long ago, had already transferred its power to the young Taoist standing before them. With just a wave of Thunder's hand in its human form, the guard's energy inside Muruk awakened instantly, transforming into a guard's battle armor that enveloped his body. However, by this time, the portal had already closed, and the divine sword had been taken to the future by the two wizards. With the main fighters stuck in the present, how would they make their way back? Meanwhile, the two wizards had been transported to a gym. Standing there, unsure of what to do as they looked around, the alien prisoner, who had once been a cult leader in ancient times, found himself teleported into a hospital. As for Ian, now the leader of the alien resistance, she was sent into the very Hava gas she had previously released. At that moment, another prisoner within the Hava gas suddenly awakened. Sharp-eyed viewers should have already noticed that this prisoner is the same male patient from the hospital. As for why Samsikai appeared in the Hava gas, it was no coincidence. In fact, his presence at the hospital where the alien prisoner had been taken was no accident either. Samsikai had always been a wildly audacious thief, bold enough to fight the police. Unfortunately for him, he crossed paths with Officer Guillen. Sharp-eyed viewers have probably also figured out by now that Guillen is actually Ian's classmate's mother, the same woman who wanted to start a romance with the guard. Guillen had just been doing yoga on the bridge when she effortlessly arrested Samsikai, accidentally beating him so badly that he ended up in the hospital. On the day the aliens rampaged through the hospital, Samsikai was planning to make a sneaky escape but ran straight into an alien's tentacle. At that moment, Guillen had coincidentally spotted Ian, who had just finished filming a video and was leaving. Guillen was there to question Samsikai, so she didn't pay any attention to Ian rushing off in a hurry. But when Gian reached Samsikai's room, she found that he had already woken up and stolen a delivery scooter to make his escape. Gian hurried downstairs to chase him but accidentally stumbled upon the guard in the parking garage. She saw the guard talking to a car and decided to hide and listen in. At that moment, while still in car form, Thunder said it had detected Ian's location through her phone, and she was likely at her classmate's house. Gian quickly realized that Ian might have gone to her own house. So, without caring about the fleeing Samsikai, she rushed home to eavesdrop on what Ian was up to. After all, a talking car was far more interesting than Samsikai. At first, Gian only overheard Ian telling her daughter that something terrible had happened at the hospital, but because Ian was too cautious, she didn't go in and ask directly, but waited for the two of them to take a break and peeked at Ian's cell phone. What she saw was the horrifying scene from the hospital. At first, Gian didn't believe that the tentacles attacking people were real, so she continued tracking the fleeing Samsikai, as the delivery scooter he had stolen conveniently had GPS tracking. But when Gian arrived near Samsikai's location, she suddenly saw the rapidly spreading Hava gas and decided to temporarily give up on capturing Samsikai. Little did she know, Samsikai, who was inside fencing his stolen goods, had already been poisoned to death by the Hava gas. When Gian returned home, she and her daughter started closely following the news. To her surprise, her daughter suddenly mentioned that she thought she saw the man from the news in the video Ian had filmed. Gian immediately realized that the red toxic gas was connected to the strange events at the hospital, so she rushed over to the command center to ask for more information. But just as she got there, the guard called, saying Ian needed to stay at her house for a few days. In truth, the guard intended to fight the prisoners alone. However, the more Gian listened to the guard, the stranger she felt about the situation. So, she drove straight to Ian's house, only to stumble upon the three aliens searching for their spaceship. What's more, during the battle, Gian was right there watching. Even Thunder spotted her. Gian witnessed the moment the guard and the others entered the time tunnel. The massive spaceship looming behind them made Gian realize that those monsters were, in fact, aliens. Panicking, she rushed back to the command center, trying to prevent the rescue team from entering the red toxic gas, fearing there were more aliens inside. But Gian's rank was too low, and not only did the higher-ups ignore her warning, they tasered her and locked her up, then sent the rescue team in anyway. As a result, not only did the rescue team fail to see any survivors, but they were also annihilated by the awakened Samsikai inside. At this point, the current alien leader, Ian, had already returned from the past. To ensure the successful release of the Hava gas, she immediately issued the order to seize the divine sword and eliminate anyone who stood in the way. Of course, the two ancient wizards had also traveled to the modern era. Upon seeing the alien on the treadmill screen, they grabbed nearby sticks and charged at it. The police arrived shortly after and arrested them. Chongwon suddenly pulled a gun from one of the officers, questioning whether they knew Ian, since he had seen Ian use the same weapon. In the next second, Chongwon was tasered on the spot. Then they were arrested and put in a police car. And Gian, who was arrested, was also in the police car. Gian stared at Hugseol and Chongwon, initially confused, but when she saw them effortlessly unlock their handcuffs, she almost thought she was seeing ghosts. Before Gian could even process it, a truck suddenly crashed into them, sending the car flying. Hugseol happened to fall into the ventilation shaft below. Gian took the keys from the police officer's body in the front seat and unlocked her handcuffs. When she turned around, she realized that the person who had crashed into them was none other than Samsikai, the very man she had been chasing. Gian then grabbed the officer's gun and fired a test shot, which Samsikai easily dodged. Just as she had expected, she immediately realized that Samsikai might already be an alien. At this point, Chongwon finally managed to unbuckle his seatbelt and also fell into the ventilation shaft. Figuring there was no way to beat him, Gian decided to follow and jump down as well. But clearly, Samsikai wasn't about to let them go. After hearing Ian's name, Gian thought it was her daughter's classmate and hurriedly pulled out her phone to show Hugseol. Hugseol only said the girl looked somewhat familiar, but the Ian she was talking about was an adult. Just as Gian was standing there confused, Samsikai came after them again. Once Gian realized that Samsikai wasn't targeting her, she decided to stay behind and provide cover. But of course, she was no match for an alien and was swiftly knocked to the ground. Luckily, Samsikai wasn't targeting her. Meanwhile, Hugseol and Chongwon had already taken cover inside a train. As Gian was trying to figure out what to do next, Ian suddenly showed up, leaving Gian even more bewildered. At the same time, in the ancient world, Thunder suddenly sensed the residual energy of the portal and transformed the spaceship back into a car. Without even asking Murek's permission, Thunder stuffed him into the car. Meanwhile, Nungpa, whose eyes had been blinded by the divine sword, miraculously regained his sight. Looking at Thunder, he felt an odd sense of familiarity. The car approached the remnants of the portal's energy, and sure enough, the portal opened again. They drove straight through it. Thunder and Murek soon found themselves in 2022. With only 14 minutes left until the Hava sphere exploded, Thunder wasted no time, turning the car back into a spaceship and racing to find the divine sword. Meanwhile, on the train, Huxiol and Chongwon were scavenging for food when Ian appeared. They had come in such a rush that they hadn't brought any magical artifacts with them, except for 2 substitution talismans. So Chongwon hastily threw down 2 substitution talismans and fled. After Ian had caused a lot of destruction, Huxiol and Chongwon's doubles suddenly appeared, but they were clearly no match for her, so they tried to pull her off the train to take her down with them. However, with her many tentacles, this plan was obviously doomed to fail. Meanwhile, Samsekai was searching for the mage on the roof, unaware that Thunder had already arrived, piloting the spaceship overhead. Before going down, Thunder didn't forget to remind Murek to make sure to give the battle armor he was wearing to Ian, because only then could Ian be saved. While Murek is confused, Thunder throws Murek out of the ship and jumps down to fight Samsekai. But when Thunder turned around, he saw Murek nearly falling off the train. Unfortunately, Thunder had no time to help him. Thunder charged forward and began battling Samsekai, but his combat skills were lacking, and he was quickly knocked aside by a piece of metal Samsekai threw at him. Murek, on the other hand, had an even worse time, because he was from ancient times and didn't understand how a train worked. He fell right off it, but fortunately, he was protected by his armor and his life was not in danger, and strangely enough, the fall seemed to help Murek figure out how the armor worked after shaking his arms a few times. He actually managed to summon it, but by then, the 2 wizards had already been caught by leader Ian, and the divine sword was nearly in her hands. At the critical moment, armored Murek finally arrived, but he, too, was impaled by one of her tentacles. He's still trying to awaken Ian's personality. Just as the divine sword was about to be taken, Murek suddenly grabbed Ian's other hand, causing her to convulse as if she were being possessed again. It turned out Murek hadn't forgotten Thunder's instructions. His goal was to transfer the armor's energy to Ian. Sure enough, in the next second, the armor began slowly transferring to Ian, until she was completely covered. But just as the armor was about to extract the controller from Ian's body, Samsekai arrived, using his tentacles to stop the process immediately. Thankfully, Thunder showed up just in time. While he wasn't a match for Samsekai, he bought the armor some precious time. As the controller was about to be completely subdued, it actually crawled out along Samsekai's tentacle and ultimately entered his body directly. Although Ian did not succeed in capturing the controller, she did not die from the alien leaving her body. This was exactly why Thunder had insisted Murek give the armor to Ian. Without it, she would have died from the separation. But that wasn't the main issue anymore. The real problem was what would happen to a human body hosting 2 aliens. After the exploding train came to a stop, they were thrown right into Ian's home, where the alien spaceship was located. Another alien prisoner had been waiting there for a long time. As soon as Thunder saw Zhejiang, he launched an attack. But Zhejiang easily caught Thunder's baton and threw it right back at him. Thunder quickly shifted into his mechanical form to dodge, but Zhejiang immediately revealed his true form and punched Thunder, sending him flying. At this point, the 2 merged aliens finally appeared. It seemed they had fully integrated with their human hosts, allowing them to survive in their original forms on Earth. Seeing Ian still lying on the ground, the giant alien monster leaped toward her, shooting out its tentacles to impale and crush her once and for all. Even though the 2 wizards knew they couldn't defeat the monster without their magical artifacts, they still tried to find weapons to attack it. At that moment, Kian suddenly drove up. Jumping out of the car just in time, she manages to crash the car into the monster and save Ian. The car even smashed into a metal rack, temporarily pinning the monster underneath it. At that moment, Huxiol suddenly spotted a portrait of Nungpa on the ground, while she was telling Chongwon with a puzzled look on her face. The monster, which was crushed by the iron frame, slowly rose up. Just when everyone was at a loss for what to do, the giant sword that had belonged to Nungpa suddenly flew into the air and slashed the monster, knocking it down again. After witnessing their time travel, Nungpa, realizing that no one had brought the magical artifacts, came up with an idea and wrote a letter on an iron scroll. he instructed his descendants living in 2022 to give these weapons to the two mages when monsters appeared. Ian, after seeing Ian's video and the Hava gas, had already brought the family's heirloom weapons with her, but she had left them in the police car that was overturned, which was why she arrived so late. Upon understanding the situation, the two mages immediately signaled the fallen Murik to get up and face the enemy. Initially, Murik had no will to fight, but when he saw his fan, he tried chanting a spell. Meanwhile, the alien battling thunder rushed toward them. Suddenly, Murik's fan floated into the air, and with a wave of his hand, a massive sword emerged from the fan, flying toward the alien. With that, the whole team was ready, and the counterattack began. Despite her severe injuries and the loss of her armor, Ian stood up once more, determined to destroy the red core of the spaceship with the divine sword and put an end to everything. But the alien Murik had knocked down charged at her again. Fortunately, Murik stepped in and fought fiercely with the alien. Meanwhile, Ian was blocked once again by the giant monster. That's when Gian launched her attack, wielding her blade with even more skill than her ancestors. Huxiol then throws another heavy punch, sending the big monster flying dozens of meters with a single punch. On the other side, Murik fought desperately and finally slashed the alien away. Before it could hit the ground, Chongwon unleashed a flurry of talismans. Chongwon's dozen or so duplicates swarmed the alien. Just then, the giant monster leaped back into the fray, but Huxiol struck it again. After the large monster freed itself from the entanglement, it once again attacked Ian and successfully captured her using its tentacles. Murik rushed to help but was caught by the tentacles as well. In the critical moment, Thunder arrived with Murik's giant sword and successfully cut the tentacles, freeing Ian. But with only 20 seconds left until the Hava sphere exploded, Ian couldn't worry about Murik and raced toward the spaceship with the divine sword. The other alien tried to stop her, but Huxiol, using the sacred mirror and Gian's blade, struck it down for good. Although Thunder had saved Murik, the giant monster struck him down as well. Just as Ian was about to reach the spaceship, the monster's tentacles reached out for her again. Ian leaped high into the air and hurled the divine sword, but instead of attacking her, the tentacles aimed directly for the sword. At the last moment, Murik picked up the giant sword again and sliced the monster in half, stopping the tentacles in their tracks. The divine sword hit the red core with perfect precision, and the Hava sphere inside the spaceship lost its function, being instantly absorbed. Afterward, Ian successfully detained the still-living controller. This fantasy battle across time and space has finally come to an end. The ancient wizards, along with Murik, returned to the past once more. Thunder took the captured prisoners back to his home planet to report. Ian, on the other hand, was inexplicably lost. After everything that had happened, she didn't know how to live alone. What she didn't realize was that Murik, back at the Byron Pavilion, couldn't stop thinking about her either. Suddenly, Murik sensed some unstable energy still lingering at the previous portal. To his surprise, when he checked it, the portal opened once again. After a brief moment of thought, Murik made his decision and charged through it once more.